Hello and good morning. My name is Robert Lee and I'm BSI's media producer. Today's webinar is about business continuity and other business tools for organizational resilience. With me today is David Hitchen, who is BSI's Global Scheme Manager for Business Continuity. David has worked in the field of business continuity management for about 10 years and is an AMBCI, which I believe is an associate member of the Business Continuity Institute. He also has a PhD in physics and incidentally was in a rock band called Miles Apart. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you over to David, who is going to take you through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. I'd like to thank you all on this webinar for responding to our email and sparing your time today and contribute to this webinar. Here at BSI, we've listened to our customers in the business continuity arena and what they have been saying. How do we improve and mature business continuity in our organizations, and particularly how to promote business continuity on the board's agenda? Unfortunately, as many business continuity professionals know, BC is often interpreted as a disaster recovery by the directors and then only features rather modestly on their agenda. Organizational resilience has commanded more attention in recent times on the director's agenda. This presentation looks firstly at business continuity techniques and in identifying its potential role or their potential role in improving organizational resilience. And then I shall open up the area to other business tools to take the conversation back to what we see as directors' interests. Every leadership team will agree that to ensure lasting success, their organizations must become resilient. This has become a management buzzword recently, but what does it really mean? Traditionally, the word resilience has focused primarily on risk mitigation, business continuity and disaster recovery, the ability to respond to a challenge, issue or crisis. I'll give you some examples of where organizational resilience was not in place.
In 2005, the Buncefield oil depot in Hemel Hempstead, UK, was destroyed by the UK's largest ever peacetime explosion. As the fifth largest oil storage facility in the UK, the explosion was heard as far as the Netherlands and registered 2.4 on the Richter scale. Crossfield Electronics office was the closest to the depot and suffered devastating damage. This British medical imaging firm, which at its peak employed over 2,000 people, had just been acquired by Fujifilm and DuPont. The design centre was reduced to rubble and crucial research and development projects were set back by 6 months, primarily due to lack of business continuity. With the collapse of US sales from 115 million to 20 million, a management buyout salvaged the firm, but suffered a total loss of US business and was eventually folded into Fujifilm. Such disasters are not the only challenges that can appear suddenly. The market collapse following the subprime mortgage crisis that saw off Lehman Brothers, the largest ever bankruptcy crisis in the US. A crisis could also come in the form of new competitors or new innovations. At its peak, Blockbuster Video had over 6,000 stores, renting and selling movies and games, and was franchised around the world. Companies such as Netflix dramatically revolutionized the market, bringing video streaming to the masses. A service Blockbuster was reluctant and late to offer. As a result, the brand has all but disappeared, preserving just 51 stores today. Whether it's a natural disaster or in business, perhaps a threat of substitution, data breach, cyber attack or scandal, resilience is seen as the difference between survival and failure. I just want to take one part of ISO 22301, which is clause 833. As the concept of organisational resilience has gained focus in recent years, I've sought to understand the component framework in really straightforward terms for business systems practitioners. So if we take away the hot air, what does it actually really mean? One area that appealed was whether this clause in the Business Continuity Requirements Standard 22301 actually covers the whole subject. So, protection and mitigation. For identified risks requiring treatment, the organisation shall consider proactive measures that reduce the likelihood of disruption. Fair enough. Shorten the period of disruption and limit the impact of disruption on the organisation's key products and services. Sounds like good sense. And the organisation shall choose and implement appropriate risk treatments in accordance with its risk appetite to mitigate those risks. That sounds pretty healthy. But is it enough? I'm not suggesting this is a definition, more as a practical tool to explore where business may focus its efforts to maintaining its long-term survival. Let's look from the organisational resilience point of view. Our customers have always been focused on the long-term survival of their organisations and businesses, and business thought leadership has recently sought to formalise the language, concepts and business tools around organisational resilience. ISO Draft International Standard 22316, which is currently being authored, the Guide for Organisational Resilience, is currently out for public comment. It describes organisational resilience as the ability of an organisation to absorb and adapt in a changing environment. Going on to say, enhancing resilience should be a strategic organisational goal. So a couple of key tenets there regarding the aspirations in the definition of organisational resilience. The ability of an organisation to absorb and adapt in a changing environment. While there is certainly always an important element of risk prevention and mitigation, which we talked about in the previous slide, in organisational resilience, as codified in ISO 22301 clause 833, is equally focused on identifying opportunities and business improvement. Organisational resilience is not a defensive strategy, it is a positive strategic enabler because robust, resilient organisations are flexible and forward-looking, seeing, anticipating, creating and taking advantage of new opportunities and is a value driver. So we need to go further than what we've talked about on risk prevention and mitigation. So I thought about this for a while and went back to this clause 833, and rather than looking at the glass half empty and looking at risks, I looked at the glass half full, where we're looking at opportunities. So I imagined a similar type of thought, responding and adapting to change. So rather, for identified risks requiring treatment, the organisation shall consider proactive measures. I put for identified opportunities requiring treatment, the organisation shall consider proactive measures. Now this is more interesting and more on the board agenda for organisations to protect their businesses. So rather than reduce the likelihood of disruption, I've substituted it with increase the likelihood of adapting to change. And rather than shorten the period of disruption, I put shorten the period of adapting to change. And C, rather than limit the impact of disruption on the organisation's key products and services, putting the positive, maximise the impact of adapting to change on an organisation's key and probably new products and services. But in both cases, the organisations should choose and implement appropriate risk treatments in accordance with their risk appetite. So, protection and mitigation represent the immediate horizon for short-term organisational resilience. In the longer term, requires considerations of both risks and opportunities. With this in mind, other business improvement techniques start to become apparent. You just think about this for a moment in your own business, and we'll return to it a little bit later. However, I need to put a couple more pieces of the jigsaw together. So firstly, I'd like to visit the subject of business impact analysis. So we've had a number of questions about business impact analysis, what it is, how do you do a good one. But we'll start with what is generally recognised as accepted principles of good business impact analysis from ISO 22301. And there's 4 elements to it. that the impact analysis identifies activities that support the provision of products and services. So understanding your organisation's processes and linking them together to make a system. Assessing the impacts over time of not performing these activities. So if one of them's unplugged, what happens to your products and services at the point of issue? And whether those impacts change with time. Some of them are immediate, some of them take a long time to evolve. Then the third part is setting prioritised timeframes for resuming these activities. So if something is important to a customer to restore within a short time scale, clearly the time frame for restoration of the activities to meet those requirements is similarly short. And finally, identify dependencies and supporting resources. So looking at internal dependencies and dependencies on external product and service providers. Now, they're the key elements in business impact analysis. But the term business impact analysis is actually short for business impact analysis of disruption of activities in an organisation. Identification of activities assessing impacts over time. This tool can be used in a different way to enhance ground-up organisational resilience rather than looking at the impact of disruption. We could look at it at the impact of adapting to change. So again, looking at it in a positive way. I'd now just like to move on to the next piece of the jigsaw, risk assessment. Now, the great and the good and thought leaders around the business world can talk for hours on defining risk and looking at risk assessment and the pros and cons of different techniques. I don't want to entertain that. I just want to make some qualitative observations regarding risk. So here are some headlines regarding how different risks have been manifest and impacts on organisations from all different disruptions and causes. The risk associated with these threats can be conveniently codified through the PESTLE acronym. So, political, environmental, social, technological, legal and economic risks. And this acronym is useful for organisations to think in a 360 degree, looking at all types of risks to their organisations, not just their often their economic risks or the commercial risks. These risks are conventionally considered as negative, but again, they can be seen as opportunities. Let's put these things together. We have business impact analysis, which we can look at disruption, but we can also look at adapting to change. We can look at risk in all the PESTLE dimensions. We recognise protection and mitigation is a useful component in organisational resilience, but it only goes part of the way. And then there's a bigger opportunity of responding and adapting to change, or the opportunity of responding to adapting to change. So if we put these things together and then look at a table of what examples we can think about, and maybe you can think in your organisations, where these tools can identify ways to take business continuity into organisational resilience by forming a framework. So I put a number of examples on the next slide. Now, I haven't done this rigorously. I've just done it to stimulate thinking. So, for example, an economic risk that an organisation may conventionally look at for protection and mitigation is hedge funding, so buying euros if their supply chain and manufacturers are in the Eurozone, so that fluctuations in currency can be hedged and limited. Or in the technical area, I remember upgrading desktop computers by putting extra RAM chips in a slot for future-proofing. These are protection and mitigation measures that organisations can employ. In the legal environment, with the tightening of the drink driving regulations, then clearly there's a incremental opportunity to protect the brewer's business in establishing alcohol-free beer. Now if we step back and have a look at the much bigger picture, then it stimulates looking at a wider horizon to look at protection and resilience in an organisation's business model. So the final example on here was establishing the next car engine exhaust catalyst because of environmental restrictions. But a game changer is Formula One. So there's a new Formula E category that's looking at electric car racing. In the drink drive regulations, there's a well-established and successful Midlands brewery, Mitchell and Butlers, which had spit and sawdust pubs chiefly in the Midlands, and with the changes in habits and changes in the drink driving law, they now have Harvesters family restaurants. So they've fundamentally changed their business model to the differing legal environment which we live. So looking at the bigger horizon and looking at these business continuity tools stimulates the juices for organisations to look at opportunities to improve their organisational resilience. So if we take a step back to the beginning, where we've looked at business impact analysis, risk assessment, protection and mitigation, these three foundation tools are important in establishing business continuity. And this crescent represents a scanning horizon for business. So the near horizon would be the use of the foundation tools from the outputs of conventional business impact analysis, risk assessment and protection and mitigation to deal with business continuity and develop incident management and business continuity plans, including the provisions we've spoken about at the beginning, protection and mitigation. However, we can move to a big horizon. Let us consider these adapted tools and open our minds to a bigger opportunity in business continuity tools. So looking at business impact analysis of enhancement and pestle risk assessment and risk and opportunity treatments, protection and mitigation, and responding and adapting to change. So it's this greater horizon of organisational resilience which is in sight. And it's an invitation for organisations to look more comprehensively at the use of these and other business tools to a greater effect on the business as usual and strategic planning for organisational resilience. So we have a gap. How do we fill this gap? I've tempted you earlier with the table about using this thought of what could be realised. But what have we learned? We'll explore this on the next slide. We can move from the tools in business continuity to put in place tools to support organisational resilience, and they're conveniently divided into three areas: supply chain resilience, operational resilience, and information security resilience. So these are the things that help bridge the gap between business continuity and organisational resilience. But before I explore these areas in a bit more detail, I want to illustrate a case study of how a combination of these three principles were key in the recovery and success of a well-known manufacturer. The Airbus 380 aircraft is the world's largest aeroplane and the first entire double-decker. It is an example of a truly global and resilient supply chain. The company relies on a global network of 7,700 suppliers, united through a common procurement system and rigorously monitored standards. It's produced 179 aircraft with a further 319 on order. It is perceived as a huge commercial success, but getting there was a challenge. The design and manufacture of the A380 required Airbus's suppliers to share a common vision with suppliers across Europe, investing billions into new technical centres and production plants. The production of an aircraft the size of the A380 didn't come without its challenges and was an incredibly complex project. Initial production of the 380 was troubled by delays attributed to the over 500 kilometres of wiring in each aircraft, and most especially complexity of the cabin wiring, 98,000 wires and 40,000 connectors. Design and production was agreed across 4 countries, and there's a high degree of customisation for each airline. There was, in the initial phases, failures of suitable change control architecture in their management system, and design facilities in Germany and Spain used a different version of a CAD system compared to the UK and French sites. This caused incompatibility in design and illustrated the need for integrated systems. This means business impact analysis, including critical dependencies in the supply chain, appropriate risk assessment, protection and mitigation, leading to operational resilience, supply chain resilience, and information security resilience, the concepts we've discussed earlier. Airbus announced to their customers and investors that orders would be delayed by 6 months, which resulted in a steep drop in the share price and loss of major contracts compared with companies like FedEx. Despite these challenges, Airbus maintained resilience, ensured transparency of information, and a belief across its suppliers and customers through leadership, focus and awareness. 10 years of continuous incremental innovation following the principles we've discussed and improvement have resulted in A380 as a successful venture. And this is most clearly reflected in the share price. Let us now move on to the view from industry leaders. Interviews undertaken by The Economist magazine clearly showed that organisational resilience can be seen as critically important, not only to business success, but to survival. Nearly 9 in 10 of the business leaders that were spoken to stated that the pursuit of organisational resilience was a priority for their organisation. It's a little surprise that 8 in 10 agreed it was a prerequisite for long-term growth, and that 6 in 10 saw it as a source of advantage against their nearest competitors. What did surprise us is how few expressed confidence in their ability of their organisations to display resilient behaviours. Only 29% felt essential resilient practices were an embedded part of their organisation's culture. Worryingly, despite their commitment to resilience as a priority, only 44% believed they had achieved resilience in 3 years' time. We believe in BSI that within any organisation, it should be the chief executive that is ultimately responsible for organisational resilience. The buck stops with the boss. Without senior management leadership, then the implementation and sustenance, resilience of both behaviour and processes within an organisation can be threatened. 57% of survey correspondents here say that having a dynamic, agile leader is very important to ensuring their organisational resilience. So, that's the view from the top. If we join this on to the view from the operations, we had those 3 segments that looked at areas to develop operational resilience, information security resilience, and supply chain resilience. So being a BSI webinar, this is where the cell comes in. What tools do we have for organisational resilience? Firstly, we have ISO and BS requirements and guidance standards that represent leading business practice in specific domains. Things like ISO 9001 or ISO 27001 for information security. Secondly, there is a training to support understanding and implementation of these standards. And thirdly, certification through independent third-party audit assessment. Finally, as separate business entities are BSI Professional Services, where advice could be sought in the environmental, the information security and supply chain management arenas. So in closing, I'd like to summarise. We've come a long way in a short time. Enhanced business continuity tools can stimulate organisations into developing an understanding of organisational resilience and help recognise tools to achieve this. Implementation of these tools bring proven benefits, allowing organisations to both survive and thrive. Those benefits stem from adoption of appropriate systems, processes, cultures and behaviours. Together, these serve to strengthen companies against the challenges and opportunities of today's increasingly complex and ever-changing business world. So, thank you very much for your attention today, and good luck with your businesses.